Mr. Isini Ibanya is the managing editor of Next Edition. He's also one of our guests on this platform. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me. And
of course, we have the grand host and country director of ActionAid, our most senior comrade, Ene Obi. He's also here with us.
I don't know if there is anything called most comrade. Thank you very much for welcoming me.
I think you are a guy at once.
Okay. Myself, I'm Newton Oshimaye. I work for ActionAid, and my colleague Anastasia Duru will also be hosting along with me on this platform today. Anastasia, you want to say good morning to everybody?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
That's great. First and foremost, I think we will want to open the floor by asking the country director, ActionAid NLB, to give us opening remarks.
I want to say good morning and welcome to especially our panelists, to our ever tireless ICPC, sister, whom, is leading a lot of transformation in looking at the issues of transparency and accountability across the country, along with our able prof and the host of team members out there. I want to say a big welcome. Thank you for creating time out of your very busy schedule at this moment of COVID-19. I want to say a big thank you. And welcoming Isine, it's so good to see you here. Thank you for the time that you're creating and the great work that you're doing out there as well.
Thank you.
Our comrade and former ActionAider, Your Excellency, Jaye Gaskia Tapikogo, if anybody remembers that in Northern Nigeria. We want to say thank you for the support and for coming to the platform at this time. We're really happy to have all of you here. The issue of transparency and accountability, I welcome all the participants, all those who have come on board. We really welcome you to the platform, and I hope that we have a good connection, a good discussion. Holds no bear, let's see it as it is. And like they say, we are saying, I pledge to Nigeria, my country. But many people, whether you are pledging from your heart or you are even observing the pledge, is another thing. Because the issues of transparency and accountability has to do with, starts from the self. How can we say, I pledge to Nigeria, my country, to be faithful, loyal, and honest, and then you are seeing something that is not? It worries you, and when you look at positions of leadership, you are seeing a lot of people who are working across, and you're wondering if they actually took that pledge and they meant it, or they mean it. COVID-19 is a leveler. We're looking at COVID-19 is something that nobody, if you look at how many months down the line, we never dreamt of it. We do our work and we go about our normal duties and all the things that we go through. But at the moment, our life has changed forever. We are witnessing something that we will never witness again in our lifetime, but it has come with a big change, and is really touching the core of humanity. And so this morning, from the corpse of our, program Scrap C, which is working focused with focus on transparency and accountability, working against, the prevalence of corruption, which is strengthening citizens' resilience against the prevalence of corruption, is what is bringing us this program this morning. And I hope that even with the lockdown, we're able to keep up with the issues of focusing on accountability of government, accountability of ourselves, accountability at the local government level, at the federal government level, and then with special focus on the money that is coming up from COVID-19. So accountability and the risk of misappropriation of public resources are other things that we're seeing. if we're looking at the homegrown school feeding, which was more launched yesterday for the children that were at home, and now we're moving them to the physical space. We're moving them to moving to their homes to help the parents on how they move. And I tell people, they are saying palliatives, COVID-19 palliatives. And I'm telling you that that is not COVID-19 palliatives. That is retooling. It's like retooling. When your machines are not working again, you retool. What they are doing is simply retooling the money that was meant for the children in school, bringing that money to see how it can be palliative. So we haven't moved. We have just done what they did is to move them for the money to be useful while we are under lockdown. It's not new money. And so we are faced with a lot of money that is coming in. We are hearing that so much money has been donated by the private sector, by the, because private sector, they are still Nigerians. For wherever the money is coming from, there is a lot of resources that is being, is coming down. And we need to look at so many studies like, looking at the 3.4 billion that is given to the government already. We are looking at, we had a webinar with the World Bank last week, and they told us about the 700 million that was already in country for a normal project, and they are promising to give us another $700 million. And so, and then there was another money that was pronounced by the, I think our colleagues will have details of that, in the discussion. But these are monies that are coming in. Up until this moment, I'm not sure, maybe you will, in the course of the discussion, will be able to bring out what is the detail of the money that has come to Nigeria, or what arrangement, or what plan, what strategic plan does Nigeria have to be able to address the issues of, strategy for COVID-19. Apart from the provision of PPE and also looking at many workers who are not even paid, what other plan does Nigeria have? And so I think it's really timely to be discussing this. We need to look at government efforts, to citizens need to, the risk to mitigate the risk of COVID-19 in terms of, looking at so many other things, the context of palliatives, the fact that so many Nigerians are below the poverty line, and we need to be able to look at more Nigerians not going below the poverty line, but because of COVID-19 lockdown, which is there is a responsibility of governance, which is keeping the people safe. In trying to keep the people safe, what are the interventions that is liable? But we need to follow the money. And within this program, we say we are going to follow the money. We are going to have, citizens need to demand accountability for what is on the ground and what is meant for them. We will not, we think that COVID-19 is a leveler where you think a lot of people will know that we are all equal, that whatever you are doing in this world, you need to look at issues of transparency. All right. And so we go along with you, we say welcome on board, and we hope to have a very fruitful discussion with the panelists. So we're going to listen to you, and we can also ask questions when that time comes. So thank you again and welcome on board.
All right, thank you very much, NLB, Country Director, ActionAid. Right now, we'll just progress and allow the guests each to use 8 minutes to speak on issues. I think we've generated the direction for this discussion. But before then, I think I want us to understand this background, that studies have shown most recently that especially the study conducted by U4 Anti-Corruption Resource Center, that there have been a wave of corruption-related incidents, shrinking transparency and accountability space, as well as manipulative political propaganda from all over the world. It's a global problem right now. The shrinking transparency and accountability space is a global problem. Nigeria cannot be exempted from this because I don't think I'm immune from the global problem. So this morning we'll be looking at this topic, accountability and the risk of misappropriation of public resources from 3 perspectives. First and foremost, we want to hear Mrs. Okodowa Rashidat, the spokesperson of ICPC, in terms of what is government effort through anti-corruption agency in collaborating with citizens to mitigating the risk of misappropriation in COVID spending in Nigeria. Mrs. Okodowa.
Thank you very much, Newton. And good morning to fellow panelists and to Ms. Obi, and also to all Nigerians who are on the platform right now for this webinar. First, let me thank ActionAid for the opportunity of the webinar because it provides a platform for us to showcase what government is doing in ensuring accountability and transparency around the utilization of the COVID-19 funds. Ms. Obi had raised other issues apart from the utilization of funds, other issues surrounding policy measures, strategies to combat the virus beyond certain issues that are being addressed right now. I guess, well, that would be for those who are in charge of the response. But let me quickly say, before I go into the main issue, that let's start with the peculiarity of the situation. Let's lay the foundation for this discussion. As Newty had said, there's a lot of corruption issues happening around COVID-19 response the world over. COVID-19, as we all very well know, is a global health challenge, and it has also spawned into an economic catastrophe for nations all across the world. Millions of lives are threatened and millions of livelihoods are threatened. Now, at the best of times, corruption is a threat to any society where you allow it to fester. It is a threat to the well-being of the citizens and development. Now, even more so in an emergency situation where you have a lot of money being at stake, where you have to move at like supersonic speed to get things done so as to preserve lives of people. So wherever you find such characteristics, huge money, speed, you will find corruption not being too far from such a situation. So beyond even the issues of money, there are other corruption issues that will surround the other processes around the response, not just the use of money. Such issues could be with even the treatment they give to people. You know, you begin to have even some measure of petty corruption around who will get treatment, who don't get treatment. You have issues of petty corruption around lockdown issues, people manage the lockdown points, roadblocks. You have big corruption issues around maybe self-dealing in contracts by government officers who are handling procurement issues. You have them cutting corners in procurement, and sometimes it's inadvertent. Sometimes some of these areas, infractions are inadvertent, but many times it is more because people are exploiting the emergency nature of the situation. So it is in this situation that we cannot deprioritize anti-corruption measures. This is the time when we need more than ever to be vigilant about whatever is happening. So what has government done, or what is government doing? First, we know that in responding to this situation, government put some money out, some money that was promised the Lagos State government, and then the private sector, as Ms. Obi had alluded to, the private sector rose up to the challenge and put a lot of resources. And by the records that we have in the commission from a correspondence with the Accountant General's office, the CBN had made a statement that around the middle of April, that fund, the fund from the private sector, the Coalition Against COVID-19, fund from the private sector has reached 25.8 billion naira as at that time. So in the face of all this huge money, we have to have some accountability measures around what is happening. So ICPC, in recognizing that need to have anti-corruption measures built into the utilization of the funds without compromising flexibility and speed of the response. What did ICPC do? ICPC had, first of all, issued an advisory to all those, concerned, but it was a public advisory, that we should not allow the emergency of the situation, the haste of the situation, to blindside us or to blind us to the need to actually comply with due processes. Even in emergency situations, there are processes that you should adhere to, meant for emergency situations, so we should not allow the haste to blind us to all that. And then in sounding the alarm, as it were, the ICPC also established its own independent monitoring team to monitor what is happening around the response. There's a presidential task force that is handling, that is at the center of the response. Also, beyond that, there were guidelines that ICPC had issued at the request of the PTF to guide them on what to do or what not to do. That guideline has already been shared with the public. It's on our website and has been spoken to in some news releases. But beyond that, government, just to show that government is actually conscious of the heightened interest of Nigerians around the utilization of this money. Government knows that people are interested in making sure this money is well utilized. And in response to that, there is a further development on the theme by government, in addition to what ICPC has done. The Office of the Accountant General of the Federation has a framework around the utilization of these COVID-19 funds. That framework has been approved by Mr. President as we speak. That framework speaks to all the concerns about transparency and accountability. What does it provide? It provides, first of all, that I said there is a COVID, Coalition Against COVID-19, a COVID fund domiciled in CBN. Apart from that account in CBN, there are 5 other accounts that were announced by Mr. President, commercial bank accounts announced by Mr. President. I think they were Access Bank, I think UBA, GTB First Bank, and I think Zenith Bank. Announced that these accounts are dedicated to the donations on COVID-19. Now, these accounts, according to the framework, these accounts are linked to the TSA, to the CBN. So they are not accounts that are run on their own, they are linked to the CBN account, and they will be, swept into the CBN, on a daily, within 24 hours. Not only that, part of the framework is that no other funds, but the donations will go into that account. Then we come to the issue, and then by sweeping it into the account in CBN, it provides a single window of viewing all of government's aggregate balances surrounding COVID-19. That's what doing that will do. When all of those accounts, when they collect the money and it's swept into a single one at CBN, it allows for immediate real-time access to government balances, and then to also see the inflows and outflows from the fund. Beyond that, in terms of expenditure, the framework from the Accountant General that I'm speaking to now also provides that all disbursement from that account will only be made through appropriation by the National Assembly. So the framework urges the Honorable Minister for Finance, Budget and National Planning to approach the National Assembly for an expedited process of passing a supplementary appropriation act on the utilization of the funds. So, and then the fund will not be used by one agency as a lump sum. Rather than say maybe it is the PTF, that's the Presidential Task Force, that will be in charge of all disbursements. No, the funds will be allocated to the MDAs that are in the chain of the response. These MDAs will not just be giving the funds like that. Their needs would have been collated even before the appropriation, supplementary appropriation act is passed. Their needs would have been collated, and of course, the needs would have been supported by estimated cost. So proper appropriation will be undertaken. And then the framework also provides that in all of the disbursement.
Okay, I think you are overshooting your time now. We will come back to you definitely at some point.
Just to make a point that government is right, on point in terms of transparency and accountability surrounding this utilization of the funds.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me quickly just go to Comrade Jai Gaskia. You've had the spokesperson of ICPC, Rashida Tokodowa, a kind of marshal out what government is doing in terms of transparency and accountability as regards to what we call it COVID-19 spending. So what role do you think citizens can play to ensure accountability and mitigate the risk of misappropriation? Jai Gaskia.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. So I'm going to speak on the back of what Mrs. Rashida Tokodowa said and what the country director has said. And I'm going to set the context in this way. I will speak to accountability. I will talk about power and control. I will talk about what are the potential risks, where are the potential risks, because you cannot mitigate risk if you don't know where the risk will come, from. And then we'll talk very quickly about what can be done to mitigate the risk. So, I mean, in this context, I think it is important for us to set it and to be very clear that accountability implies taking ownership of a process, and that the obligation includes responding to questions, to explain the decisions that have been taken, in the management of public affairs. So accountability of public resources in this manner, we'll be looking at it. Now, it's also important to set out very clearly, and like Mrs. Rashidat already began to do, that the powers and control over public funds are set out in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 as amended. And at the relevant sections, section 80 and 120, with respect to the Federation and the states, which establishes the power of the executive to prepare expenditures. Section 83 and section 123 establishes and vests power in the legislature to authorize, to appropriate and authorize spending from the public expenditures. And section 85 and section 125 establishes the office of the Auditor General of the Federation, which is vested with the power to take receipts of all expenditures and to audit the accounts of all expenditures, public expenditures, and present same to the National Assembly. So, what is the implication of this, therefore? The implication of this is that the executive, and this is important for accountability in this process now, because we are talking about all of the monies that are being spent, is that the executive arm of government cannot spend money without appropriation by the legislature. That's important, and we should begin to ask these questions. It is unconstitutional and illegal for that to happen. It is also illegal and unconstitutional to operate any funds or accounts outside of the Consolidated Revenue Fund established by the Constitution without legislative approval for the establishment of such a fund. So the Constitution is very clear in sections 82, 81 and 82 about that if you need to establish a contingency fund of some sort, you need to have the express permission of the legislature to do that. Now, so where are the potential risks? So the funds for the private sector and the rest that have been established ought to have legislative backing, and we need to ensure that this is done. Now, so where are the potential areas of risk for misappropriation in this? There are four main areas, categories within the public, between the COVID-19 pandemic that we have, where there are risks for misappropriation of funds. The public health issues. So there are issues around testing capacity. There are issues around isolation and treatment and the centers. There are issues around social distancing and enforcing that. There are also issues around public hygiene, sanitation and the rest of that. For example, the provision of hand wash, running water and sanitizers in public offices and the rest of that. Now, the point I'm making is that for each of all of these areas, you require the expenditure of public resources. So for testing, you require to pay for testing. And it is not the public that is paying, it is coming from the public force. For treatment, the treatment is also coming from the public force. By now, we should have an idea of what is the average cost of treatment per individual, which will include testing, up to the when an individual is discharged or deceased, from the pandemic. And what is the cost of establishing isolation centers? We have about 15 testing laboratories across the country now. What is the cost of establishing this? Because public resources are going to be deployed into this, and for equipping and for personnel and all of this. For the personnel that are managing the public health emergency, what is the cost, for personal protective equipment that is going to be deployed and that is going to be used? Now, the second area is in the area of palliatives. And the stimulus packages, which the impact on the economy. So we have since learned that there are quite a number of palliatives that are that sub-governments, for example, state governments, have said that they are distributing palliatives to 90,000 households, to 100,000 households. And the question is, these palliatives are coming from public resources. Were they legislated for? And how were the households selected? And what role did local government areas, play in identification and distribution of these palliatives. There is a question of equity and inclusion in the design and implementation of the palliatives as well. Now, the economic impact. The economic impact are around public health issues. They are around the lockdown, social distancing. They are around the impact of inability of businesses to operate. And what are the measures that have been put in place? And these are the places where, again, there is a risk for misappropriation of also. The CBN, for instance, has established 2 funds that we know of. There is the Targeted Credit Facility Fund for micro, small, and medium enterprises, which is 50 billion. There is the 100 billion Naira fund for the healthcare sector, particularly pharmaceuticals and manufacture of equipment that have been established. Now, how are these what's the criteria for assessing this? How are these being managed? And what's the legislative process for this? The federal government is also saying that it is thinking of putting together a proposal for a 2 trillion stimulus package. Again, it's going to come from the public resources of the federation. Now, various state governments are also mulling their own stimulus packages. And then we have the IMF facility of 3.4 billion that is also there. Now, all of these various stimulus packages without a framework, and not just a framework for the management of funds, but also a framework, a strategy, for responding, a holistic strategy for responding to the pandemic, and an implementation strategy for that would give room for ad hoc, expenditures, which are more prone to being misappropriated. Now, so what are the main areas where the risks are associated? So the areas are with legislative process, with respect to authorization and approval. Procurement processes are going to be extremely very susceptible to misappropriation. Operational processes, including design, management, and implementation of various measures. Personnel management, with respect to recruitment, training, equipment, and deployment of various personnel to undertake various measures are also areas where we can expect. Okay. Finally, what is required to ensure accountability? Finally, we must insist on compliance with all the measures with constitutional and legal provisions. We must insist on legislative action. It must be mandatory. We must also insist on legislative oversight, and then also, particularly citizens' oversight. There must be monitoring mechanisms put in place where citizens can play a direct role in monitoring, tracking these expenditures, and ensuring that they actually get to the appropriate quarters, and we must keep records.
Well, thank you very much, Comrade Jaye Gaskia. I think that is quite insightful. I want to turn to Mr. Ibaya Isemi. Can we look at what the media, we know that the media is actually referred to as the fourth estate in the structure of governance in every country. That is to say, though they are there to actually check what government, the legislature, and the judiciary is actually doing in maintaining proper governance in the country. Now, within the COVID-19 spending and COVID-19 space, what do you think media can do to ensure accountability and transparency? Iban.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I want to begin by saying that the concept of the media being the fourth estate of the realm, especially in Nigeria, is utopian. Because the media is not accorded that, not given that kind of support and that kind of status in the country. But the media in Nigeria has tried so much over time, as within the space that we are given, held government accountable for what it is doing, sometimes at the expense of life, the comfort of journalists. The country director, your country director, and the previous speakers have outlined some of the issues that are in contention and that should be looked at. But specifically from the media aspects, I'm worried because since the outbreak of this pandemic, what the media has reported has just been what politicians and state actors have said. I'm yet to see, we are yet to see stories that cut into the belly of the operations of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. I am yet to see a detailed story, except from few states where some journalists are scratching some of the things that state governments are doing. And as we speak, like Mrs. Okudu has said, the process of spending funds must go through the National Assembly. But we've seen that from the January 3, when the coronavirus preparedness group was formed, to March 9, when the president actually inaugurated the task force, and state governors have done did the same. Nobody has told us how much is being expended and where the funds are coming from. We have heard of the monies domiciled in the CDN, but as we speak, money is being expended. The National Assembly came on a few days ago, and what they did was not actually to look for ways of appropriating funds for the intervention, for the response. What they were doing is actually to hasten the process of passing a new bill, a draconian bill that would force people to vaccinate. Now, where do journalism comes in all this? We need to up our game. Now, some of the measures to get under and see what is happening could be very, very dire. That is because we have to leave the surface, we have to leave the briefing rooms and get to where things are happening. Now, as we speak now, apart from a few persons who have come out to say, I had the virus, I was isolated, I was treated, nobody knows exactly what happens inside the isolation centers and how the treatments are being administered. Like the last speaker said, the treatment, what is the cost of treatment? Who is being treated and how? We have also said here that I had a personal experience. Any sickness you have now and you go to the hospital, they will try to tie it to COVID-19 and people are dying. People are afraid to go to hospital. These are some of the stories we want journalists to tell. And one other thing here, the journalists should leave, or those who are concentrating on in the briefing, because that's their bit, should continue doing that. But media houses should get journalists to go into the isolation centers. There's no better way of knowing what is happening, especially how the treatments are done, how the quality of the treatment, the quality of the services, who is involved in what and why, without having some level of participant observation. Now, undercover reporting should be deployed now. No matter what, if some media houses who have little resources and can get the personal protection equipment for their staff, it is possible to go underneath and find out what has happened. People have accused the NCDC of a lot of things, including sending text messages to people to say they have coronavirus and then they'll be given some money. No media organization has looked into any of these allegations and they are still hanging there. We see them every day. People come, record videos, and then tell us what their experiences have been. I think we should move beyond that. Now, to hold this the government accountable, let's look beyond the statistics of infections, the fatalities, the recoveries. What is happening under beyond the cameras? Who are those doing what? Who is buying what? The media can, bring out these operations that are shrouded in secrecy. At the federal and state level, the so-called palliatives, including cash, foodstuff, and personal protection equipment, have been shared without proper records of the beneficiaries. The other time, the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, Social Development, Sadia, had indicated that a transfer program, cash transfers were made to people. As we speak, in my community, in my state, nobody has come to say they collected anything. and the minister went on national television to say these people don't want it. No government runs a program like that without records. It's unheard of that you don't have records and people don't want to be named. Come on. You can't tell us that. This is public funds and there must be mechanism for accountability. And so the media must find out from their states who got the cash transfer. And we are also hearing, as if it is a very beautiful thing, that children are in their homes. When they were in schools, the quality of services and what was happening was not anything to write home about. And now they're at home and you're telling us that you are going there to feed them. Let journalists spread all over the state of the Federation and see how they are going to be feeding children from their homes. This is something we have to do. Now, how do we ensure accountability and transparency in COVID-19 response? There are several ways to hold the state actors and all entities accountable for resources meant for the containment of this virus. Investigative reporting, including undercover reportage, can be used, but one of the most effective approaches is borrowing the tools of humanitarian response reporting. I'm going to tell you that, so government should have a clear response plan. And if journalists lay a hand on that response plan, showing deliverables, timelines for in the result chain. That is, hello, am I with us?
Okay, you're back now.
Okay, now, based on whatever response plan they have, because there should be a response plan, the media should be aware of that response plan. And then the reporters should focus on 3 key links in the result chain. That is input, output, and outcome. Now, input refers to financial, human, and material resources available for the COVID-19 response at the federal, state, and the FCT. We must know this. Journalists and media houses should do a freedom of information request asking the authorities concerned to let us have access to COVID-19 response plan. And based on that, they should check what the inputs are, ask questions about the output, and check the outcome from based on what you.
I will have to stop you there because of time. Definitely there is enough time. We'll come back to you again to finish that analysis. But right now, and I'm very sure that a lot of participants, they've sent in some questions, and my colleague, Anastasia Duru, you want to share some of the questions with the panelists?
Oh, okay. Good morning once again. The questions I have here, some of them have been answered by Mr. Iba, but mostly the question concerning how journalists can track the money spent by the government, be it in the state or federal government, especially the state government, which their activities are shrouded in secrecy. So somebody was asking, how can journalists track this? But I think you've already answered that by investigative journalism and human rights-based approach. But the second question the person asked was, to what extent can the FOI assist in getting sensitive information as regard how such administration spend public funds? So if you can
share let me come there. This is a country that makes laws and refuses to obey or implement those laws. As a private citizen and a journalist, in my capacity, I have written several freedom of information requests, and in most cases, government organizations and state actors would refuse to sit on those requests. I know that most of our colleagues have written freedom of information requests to government establishments, and they don't. And presently, there are cases in court challenging state actors for violating the freedom of information request. They will use certain measures, but that should not stop us. What I advocate or advise journalists to do is write the freedom of information request, get the story you have out there. When you write and you wait for the statutory time frame and they do not respond, go ahead, publish your story, have your freedom of information request that you have written, and wait for them when they would come back and say, you did not speak to us, we didn't get this, this is libelous and all that. No journalist will go to court or to jail for protecting public interest. So journalists should do all they can, within the ambit of the law and their personal safety, because you can be infected. Somebody can deliberately infect you with the coronavirus because of you are nosing and you are trying to do what. So you have to be very, very cautious. You have to be very, very careful. There's so much money at stake, and people could do anything. And so journalists should not also stop at nothing. They should stop at nothing to ensure that we get these people to account for what they are doing. That's number one. Number two, there are some journalists who are being held across the country in some states. We remember the case of Ebonyi. Remember the case, there's some cases one case in Akwa Ibom State. We want to appeal to those who are holding these people to expedite action and let them out. You see, journalism is not a crime and can never be a crime. When journalists ask questions and put out materials which they think is for the overriding interest of the public, nobody should incarcerate them. I've had some stints with Mrs. Okodua, and we disagreed, and we agree again. For the first time, I'm meeting her now through this virtual. But I have so much respect for her, because in spite of the fact that I poked her so hard, and she poked me back, and I poked her, we are still the best of friends, and we know that what we are doing is not personal. What we are doing is for the sake of this country. So journalists should be allowed access to information. They should be supported in as much as possible to do that.
All right, sir. Okay, but somebody is saying, based on your analysis, do you think that journalists are failing to give people the answer that they need?
You said what, please?
He said, based on your analysis, do you think that journalists are failing to give the people the answer that they need?
The journalists are failing to give the people.
Yes, the answer that they need.
If you don't get an answer, if you don't get the answer from those who are supposed to give, you can't give your own answer. So the answer you must get the answer from those in authority. You ask questions even at the presidential task force briefing, and then they will just find one way or the other to sweep it up down. Now, in the task force, there should have been representations from professional
Hello, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Serious groups like have. There's certain information that can be made available to you, but we don't have that.
Okay, I think that is clear enough. There is Anastasia, there's a question for Mrs. Okodua.
Yes, there are a couple of questions for Mrs. Okodua. So I'll start with the first question for Mrs. Okodua. Hello, Ma, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so the first question for you here is, what is the ICPC and other anti-graft agencies' plan post-COVID-19 in ensuring accountability? What is ICPC's and other anti-graft plan post-COVID-19 ensuring accountability?
Okay.
So you just do it to be brief, because there are couples of questions here for you, ma.
Okay, quickly, but let me
Why
just
don't you ask some of the questions?
Okay.
Okay, do you want me to read out all the questions for you?
Please, yes, let her take all the questions.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, so another question here for you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, they said, great, that ICPC has an advisory for government on procurement in emergencies, but in what way are we also going to enable and ensure citizens are also enabled to monitor expenditure and use of public funds in response system? So that's one question. Did you get that, ma?
Yes.
Okay, so another question is, why are Nigerians being asked to pay for evacuation and isolation upon arrival in Nigeria? So Nigerians in India are being asked to pay per individuals certain amounts of money for isolation in Nigeria. So why are the funds donated in Nigeria not being applied to bring back stranded Nigerians from other countries?
Okay, are you done?
Yes, ma. I think that's all for you.
Okay, the first question is on what we are going to do or what we are going to do post-COVID to ensure transparency and accountability.
Yes, ma'am.
In the guidelines that we sent to the PTF, the Presidential Task Force, it's also indicated there that certain measures we expect them to take post-COVID. So our involvement in this response is both now, while the COVID-19 experience is ongoing, and also post. In fact, more will be done post-COVID, because that is when we will have the luxury of going through all records. There'll be no more haste or somebody saying that you are obstructing processes or you are bringing bureaucracy, we are not letting us respond rapidly. Post-COVID, ICPC will look into all the processes and then investigate where necessary if there are infractions and do the needful. So the Nigerians should be rest assured that ICPC will do what it needs to do, especially post-COVID. The second issue, that how do citizens, how do we ensure that they're able to monitor expenditure? The answer I'll give to this question will also be an input into what my brother Isine had said earlier about the use of the FOI Act. You know, when I was talking about the approved framework from the approved framework for the utilization of the funds that came from the Accountant General's office to guide the utilization of the COVID-19 funds, part of the provisions of that framework is a provision that says it's mandatory for all participating MDAs to provide information to citizens, anybody, whether individual or corporate organization, that seeks information on what they have done with the COVID-19 funds. It didn't say they should, it says it is mandatory. That's the word that is used. And the guideline further states that they should provide it within the statutory 7 days of request. And that if they refuse to provide the information, then that is a flag to everybody that there's possibility of mismanagement of the funds, and that erring MDA may be suspended from the program, may be suspended, and the name of the MDA and its principal officers will be published to say you are not complying. It will be seen as a direct contravention of the guidelines. So let citizens, and I'm happy that my brother also talked about the important role of the media, and I'm happy he also talked very objectively that media needs to do a lot more, just like citizens need to do a lot more. Citizens via the CSOs. Let us all come together, citizens and government and media, to make this country very vibrant in all the ways it needs to be. Government doesn't know it all. So you have to help government. You have to be willing to do what is needful. So media and ordinary citizens, should you test the FOI Act, the law? These guidelines, this framework says it is mandatory they should respond to you. Let's test it and see how it goes. Then why are Nigerians being asked to pay for isolation and what did you say again, for evacuation and isolation? That is something that I cannot speak to right now, because we have no insight into what's made that to be. But what I can hazard a guess. It might be along the lines of the need to judiciously apply the funds available. The need to be sure there is no infinite resources. You know, resources are always finite. So even the COVID-19 funds, no matter how large they sound to us, the expenses that are attached to the response are humongous in terms of, if you look at how much they sell ventilators and all that. So maybe, I'm just hazarding a guess, maybe that's decision or policy was because of concern for focusing the money where it is most needed. So that if we're evacuating you at your request, if government is evacuating it at your request, evacuating you from a country, then you should then pay for that evacuation. So I think maybe that's the reason, but I am not sure. I'm not aware of the actual official reason.
All right. Thank you, ma. Thank you, ma. But before we move the questions for Comrade Jaye, so ma, can you just give us a brief of what ICPC is doing concerning this very soon Kaduna's homegrown school feeding program that will be done in the home. So what can you, briefly, can you tell us what ICPC is doing? Will you be able to join in this distribution?
Kaduna, what did you call it, please?
The homegrown school feeding program.
Yeah.
The recent homegrown school feeding program that will be done in that, like at home, instead of schools now. The recently announced homegrown school feeding program. So somebody is asking, Kaduna will soon start the feeding program at home. So how can ICPC join in the distribution?
In fact, there are two principal ways that ICPC has planned to join, because one aspect is already even being implemented by us. We have asked CSOs, some of our state offices are using the CSOs, within the states to monitor what is happening in those states and bring reports to ICPC. Secondly, ICPC's own officers will be deployed. I'm aware that we have had correspondence, exchange correspondence with the Minister for Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development and Disaster Management around the conditional cash transfer. And the ministry had requested for our officers to monitor the process. Since the the homegrown feeding program is also part of the social investment responses to, handled by the ministry, that also we will be able to monitor as well. So a two-pronged approach. First, using CSOs. Secondly, ICPC officers themselves directly monitoring the process. The caveat is just that we are not too many on ground as personnel in terms of numbers. The totality of ICPC personnel right now, including all functions, administrative, social, everything, is less than 800 nationwide. So it's only within that limitation, but that we will monitor. Yes, we shall monitor.
Okay, but thank you very much, Ma. So over to Comrade Jaye. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
So first question for you here is, where do you see CSOs and citizens platforms sitting in the efforts in ensuring accountability in the COVID-19 response system? Where do you see CSOs and citizens platforms sitting in the effort of ensuring accountability in the COVID-19 response system? That's the first question. My second question is, can you suggest a sustainable monitoring mechanism where citizens will play a direct role on oversight on the spending of COVID-19 funds? Did you get that?
All right, yes.
Okay, so you have a few minutes, sir. Just try to be brief.
Okay, all right. So the two questions are actually interrelated. So I will speak to them as such, and then also make very brief comments on some of the earlier responses. Now, I think that the first thing is that it's important for us to understand that spendings and public resources are being expended in two ways. That is COVID-19 specific spending and COVID-19 relevant spending. So, for example, the retooling of the homegrown school feeding program to now feed to the pupils at home is a COVID-19 relevant spending, not a COVID-19 specific spending. So it's important to do that, but all of that is important. So where do citizens sit and CSOs sit? The first thing to say is that just like I said earlier, and like Ibanga said earlier too, the first thing that we need is that citizens need to be part and parcel, and through their organizations, civil society organizations, community organizations, need to be part and parcel of the multi-stakeholder, forums and platforms that are doing a number of things. One, designing the response. Two, managing the implementation of the response. And then three, monitoring the implementation of the response. Now, so designing the response, for example, now government ought to have a response strategy. Federal and state governments ought to have response strategies. It is important that the designing of this should be a multi-stakeholder platform. So you should have citizens, organizations, CSOs represented in such a platform that is designing. I'm aware that the Economic Sustainability Committee is designing a response for post-COVID-19 as well. Citizens organizations, professional associations need to be part of that process. And I will explain to you, I'll give you an example of how this ought to work if we are going to make this happen. So the Presidential Task Force, the various state task forces, and then the task forces at the local government area ought to include representatives of citizens organizations, CSOs, the media, professional associations, relevant ones, as well as the community organizations. This is also going to be the effective framework for monitoring, because if they are part of managing the response, if they are part of managing the implementation of the response, then they will also know what to track and be able to keep records when they are tracking. And their own role should be really to just ensure inclusion, equity and social inclusion, and then transparency and accountability, and to make all of these records. So the question that was asked to Mrs. Rashidat earlier about why Nigerians have to pay for evacuation, for instance, is one of the things that we really need to address, because this is part of the area of equity and social inclusion. It's not all Nigerians may request to be evacuated, but it is not all Nigerians that are requested to be evacuated that have the means and the wherewithal, to be evacuated. And so, just like in the distribution of the palliatives at home, there should be a mechanism for determining who needs assistance, who is needy and therefore needs assistance, and who does not need it, in order to ensure that there is a social inclusion in this. I'm very sure that there are many Nigerians that are stranded that want to come back home, but because they cannot pay, are unable to register, for the evacuation. So, like I said, the multi-stakeholder platforms are the most significant ways to ensure that we have this happen. The second thing is to also ensure that there is legislation. If there is no response strategy from the executive and there is no legislation backing up the expenditures and their actions from the legislative arm of government, it will be difficult and nearly impossible to track things, because then things are going to be ad hoc. And so citizens are not going to be able to say, okay, you said you are going to purchase 100,000 ventilators, okay? And this is how much that you spent on it. But if there is no plan, anybody can just come and there is no record. Anybody can come at the end of the day to say that this is how much we spent to buy so amount of ventilators. But you cannot check it against anything because there are no records for that. And that's why the response strategy, the legislation is important, and that in all of these committees that have been established and that have been set up, citizens organizations must be part of these various committees at the federal, at the state, and at the local government level. I'm very concerned about the exclusion of local governments in many of the responses, particularly at the state level. In the FCT, the local governments have been included, but in many of the states, the local government areas are excluded. And it is important that we should ensure that local government areas are included, and that they also have committees that include representatives, citizens representatives from the different wards in the local government.
Thank you very much. Anastasia, do we still have more questions for the panelists? Anna, do we still have more questions?
Yes, we have more questions. We have more questions.
Please read them out.
Okay, this question is directed to Comrade Iba, yeah. So somebody is asking, sir.
Yeah.
He said, it is surprising when Nigerians put so much at the doorsteps of journalists, forgetting the troubles facing the media. So could we have balanced, objective, and thorough investigative reporting, whether on COVID-19 spending or beyond, if the media is as troubled economically and technologically? So what's your take on that, sir?
It's a very difficult task for the media, because in this country, every other sector has some form of intervention. The government bailout and subsidy and all that. But they say if you give media bailout, or there's an intervention fund in the media, you are buying the media. I don't see how that would happen, because when our colleagues come from outside with all the money chest, the money they have, the card, they come with so much money, and our people respect them so much because they give tips and all that. And you go to do an investigation in a community and people ask you for water, you cannot provide. These are things that are so very depressing. The technology you are using, we struggle. Some journalists buy the laptops, the things they use in working. And then it is very difficult, but that should not discourage us. I advise that there are a lot of funds available. Some of the investigations I've done have not been funded by my organization or through my, although we still bring in some money. There are some grants available. If you have done good stories before and you are willing to do a better story, when you send a proposal that is doable and they look at your profile, you've done a good story, you've been working very hard, I think it could help. I don't think if ICPC and EFCC should go into collaboration with media organizations to support the operations, that is still corruption, because it will help both the media and the anti-graft agency to work in the same page and hold these people accountable. I think if ICPC and EFCC, those ones are not strictly government establishment that could say, yo, they gave you the money they gave you, you must come and retire, you must say what I'm saying. I think there should be some form of intervention, especially to media organizations and journalists who are doing great jobs and they have a potential of doing better and better, greater jobs to help bring the information that people need. The surveillance function of the media is not carried out in press briefing rooms. The surveillance function of the media is achieved through investigation, and investigation costs money. It is dangerous, and journalists have to be a bit comfortable to go into them. So I want to strongly suggest that Madam Rashidat and a colleague in the EFCC should have a desk that could enable the media and civil society interface and see how they could support some key investigations that could bring some form of accountability, transparency, and openness in governance in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you, sir. So the next question is for Mrs. Okodua. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, somebody is asking, how would citizens know the amount that was received and expended for the distribution of palliatives in FCT? Because it is a serious anti-corruption issue and it should be looked into by ICPC. So how can one know? Yeah.
All right. Part of the framework that I mentioned earlier by the Accountant General indicates, or part of the provisions indicate that on a daily basis, the accountant, there's the Treasury portal, Open Treasury portal that government has developed or established to post its own statement, financial statements. The Accountant General will post a daily statement, Treasury statement on inflows into the COVID-19 funds and outflows. And then on that portal is www.opentreasury.ng. Now, not only that, the beneficiary MDA, the affected MDA that is going to be spending these monies, are also to post a daily return of their expenditure be over 5 million. Of course, one should be careful about the over 5 million, because if people can exploit the threshold and be doing things that are not good with the under 5 million. But the framework provides that they should post a daily report of their activities showing the amount they paid out, the company they paid it to, and the purpose for which it was paid. All of these things can be accessed. And they're also, by that guideline, by that framework, also it's mandatory for them, the MDAs who are going to be spending these monies, to also put on their websites, to also do monthly accounting. And at the end of the whole COVID-19, the framework says the Accountant General will also post a comprehensive report on its own website, on the Open Treasury website, SGF website, Minister of Finance website, and so on and so forth. Now, citizens, how do they come in? How do they know how much is paid for what? Just go to those, do what the legwork. Go to those portals, go to the portals, go to the website, track, trace. You know, my brother had talked about the issues surrounding that. How do you monitor and so many, you know, when people spend money, how do you go and do the work itself and see if things are not going right, then you raise the issues. You escalate the issues to the anti-corruption agencies that they said, you know, he mentioned, Mr. Iba mentioned the appropriation, the need for appropriation. This guideline says, this framework says there must be appropriation. And then by the appropriation, that appropriation will be based. It's not just going to be, how would I say, it's going to be based on specific needs and costs stated that you can track later, that you can audit later to say, you say you were going to get XYZ, did you get it? So people should use those opportunities and also the FOI Act to track all these things that, we need to track. I want to quickly say something to Mr. Iba's statement about ICPC and EFCC coming together to encourage or to do things to motivate the media. I want to say that ICPC has that as a matter of internal policy in-house. You know, we're evolving every day. We have had in the past, we have trained specific media persons on anti-corruption, investigating corruption issues, send them to training abroad and, you know, even internally as well. But within our resources, it's now a matter of policy before our board now that ICPC will, you know, be in a robust partnership with the media to the extent that within its own resources, it can also do things to motivate the media because, like he said, they are our partners. Then we need them to help us in the surveillance aspect. So being sponsored by ICPC does not mean that somebody will say you've collected money. We are empowering them to help us do this job, you know, to help us do the investigations, to help us amplify anti-corruption issues, you know, so that we can all get to the result we want at the end of the day.
Okay, it appears we are running out of time.
Okay.
Anna, there is still one question. I think after that, we can just go back to the panelists.
All right.
The question on, I think Mrs. Okodua, this question is to you. They want you to quote that site again, that website again. People are waiting to copy it. The website, www.
Okay, it's www.opentreasury, O-P-E-N, treasury, T-R-E-A-S-U-R-Y, www.opentreasury.gov.ng. opentreasury.gov.ng.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
There's another one to Isini. Both government and private media are not well funded to carry out investigative reporting. Is this on purpose so that they will not hold government accountable?
The fact is that I would not say it is government owes the media a responsibility of funding. But that, like I said, there should be intervention. Mrs. Tokudu has said that some journalists were trained and even sent abroad. I would want to know those journalists, because have they come back and delivered? Because if you send somebody abroad for that level of training, it should come back and should be a star. We want to know these journalists who were trained and they come back and they're still remaining the way they were. So what was the criteria for selecting them? What was the antecedent? What were they doing before the selection? And when they came back, what value addition have they brought to the table? These are issues. So when you are looking for people to support in the media, you should look for those who have the capacity, the motivation, and the experience. I'm not, please, with due apologies, I'm not talking about myself. I have enough training, but I want the new generation. There are some very beautiful and good journalists out there who do not have support. So ICPC should do well, and the EFCC to bring these people, assist the media or media institutions, as it were. And
okay.
Government will not bring money to the media.
There's really no more time. Somebody's raising up his hands. I think let me take some few questions from the audience. Yes, you can speak, sir. Hello, Mojid Alabi. Hello, Mojid. Okay, Mojid is not talking now. Let me take.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please, quickly.
Yeah, thank you very much. Though some of the questions have actually been answered by Mr. Isinimbaha, this is part of what we were actually raising, that it is challenging for the media out there. So particularly when you look at it today, where we have a Punch already signaling its intention to down tools, where you have radio, some radio stations already showing interest in asking people to go on leave without pay. Almost 90% of the media these days, particularly.
Mojib, because of time, maybe just ask the question.
So the question is, how do you think the media can be supported? People are talking about bailout. Can bailout, will bailout will it not be abused? Is there a framework that can be used with the bailout system, if it is possible?
All right, that's fine. The next, there's another person, Victoria Emma. Victoria, your hands will soar. Victoria.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Please go ahead. Your question.
My question is in most states, civil society organizations have been included in the task force committees, but there are less than 20% utilized in the process of planning, expenditure, and monitoring, and also how it.
Hello?
How can we do that?
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I think those are the two questions coming from the audience. One is directly to Ibaya. I think the other one, anybody can take that question, that civil society co-opted into the team in Imo State, but they are underutilized. So I don't know whether anybody want to speak to that. Jai?
Okay.
Yeah. That question seems close to you.
Yeah.
Ibaya, please respond to Moji Dalabi.
Okay. Before I go to respond to Moji Dalabi, on a very sad note, we've lost two very key civil society activists in the country in the last 7 days. We
don't have time. We're going to do this very quickly.
Okay. Now, Moji, on Moji's question, there could be a bailout from government to the media, and then the pattern, the framework for utilization and maybe exit should clearly be defined. Like they give central bank does something to farmers, to medium-scale farmers and people in productive sectors. I think something like that could come, where the media could get some funding and then pays back in time and then exit it. There will be no crime in doing that. But it's left for the policymakers, probably those of us who have contact with the people in the National Assembly. We could look at a bill or some form of framework where that could be established. There's nothing wrong with experimenting that in Nigeria, even if it does not exist any other place, in any other place.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Jai, you want to respond to Victoria?
Yes, let me respond to that. So yes, that's one of the things that we were advocating for, that civil society should be part of those committees. Now, let me make a point, and this is my advice to all civil society organizations and citizens organizations. COVID-19 has impacted on virtually all aspects of life and living in society. So there is no work that any civil society is doing in whatever sector that has not, in one way or the other, been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you are working on education, it has impacted education. If you are working on health, it has impacted health. If you are working on gender issues, there are gender issues in COVID-19. If you are working on youth, there are youth issues in COVID-19. So what you need to do is to retool your activities to take on board the impact of COVID-19 on the sector that you are working, and to continue with your normal and necessary advocacy that you do. There is absolutely no reason why there should we should not have civil society coalitions on COVID-19 at the level, at the different state levels in the country and nationally. I know that there is a I know that there is a coalition at the national level. I know that there are some situation rooms being established by civil society organizations at the state level. So we should continue with our normal advocacy. Intensify that advocacy in this period. We are part of a committee. The committee is not allowing us access to what we need to have access to. The same way we do pre-COVID-19, we should do it now. We should ensure and insist that we cannot be mere decorative members of a committee. If we are members of a committee, we must be part and parcel of the processes of the committee, and we must insist on that. And if it is not being done, we raise the alarm and we bring it out, and we do the alliances with the media, because the media needs information in order to report. These are the kind of information we need to get to the media, so that the media, we build a partnership with the media, we ensure that this is done. So that's the way I see us doing this and getting it done.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, in wrapping up, Mrs. Okodua, I want to give you just a minute. You have one or two things to add to what you've said so far.
It's just basically to reiterate that government is doing or is putting frameworks in place, or has put frameworks in place to ensure that we put to rest the concerns about transparency and accountability around this COVID-19 funds. And to say, categorically, that citizens are urged, media, CSOs, please be part of the process. Like Jaya has just said now, that you should advocate around it. You should blow the whistle, work with the media so that we can resolve issues where you are not allowed room. Everybody will hear you are not being given room, you are not being given information. So we need that to happen. Let them monitor procurement, let them ask questions, let there be citizen experience feedback on palliatives, to be gathered by the CSOs.
Sure. Comrade Jai, in a minute.
Yeah. Very, very simply, our role and our task as citizens and civil society is to be vigilant, is to advocate, is to ask questions, is to seek, is to investigate. Now, if we were doing that during normalcy, we need to be doubly committed to it. Now, we need to redouble our commitment to doing that now in a period of emergency, because this is an existential crisis. It is up to us to ask the right questions, make the right moves, and take the necessary action that is important. There is nothing, we've done this in the past, we should do it now. This is where we actually need to do it more. Thank you.
Yeah. Iban, please, in a minute.
Yeah. I want to encourage our colleagues, in spite of the difficulties we are facing, we shouldn't leave the briefing rooms and then get the surveillance function activated. The surveillance function wants you to ask pertinent questions, go to places, find ways. There's always a way to investigate, to find out the claims by your government, the claims by the presidential task force, and then come back with evidence-based stories that will hold this accountable. It is not late to start.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I don't know, Mr. Okodua is still raising up your hand. We're out of time.
Let me quickly read out our toll-free line for all complaints. It is 0800-2255-4272. Again, 0800-2255-4272. It is toll-free. You can call it. If we're not at work, we'll retrieve the number and call that number that has called up before for all complaints surrounding corruption.
Thank you very much. I think the country director is still there. I would just want her to close this meeting. It's been a very, very resourceful one, and with debates that I don't think we'll forget easily. Thank you very much. Country director.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to say a big thank you to, to the moderator, the panelists, and the participants. I've listened very keenly, and it's very, very invoking. I look at a lot of things. I want to let our colleagues from ICPC know. I went to that website immediately. It's a beautiful website. It's a beautiful website if only they can load it, if they can update it. But if you look at it, you see that it's not updated. Maybe the site that one should go to is we have to commend the government for that, but it should be updated. There should be another time, Newton, when we engage with the Auditor General's report for 2017. Because when we are looking at bureaucracies, we are looking at alignment of how they are going to give out the money. They are giving it to MDAs. Is it the MDAs that do not render any accounts? You know, according to the 2017 report, about 300 and something, 323, MDAs, very core. And even some core MDAs, more than 23 of them do not render any account in terms of auditing, and they are still getting the money. Are those the ones that are going to get this money? We need to look at accountability. I think that 2017 report is a very big report that Nigerians should engage in, and we need to engage in all the auditor, the reports that are coming after that, thereafter. Some Nigerians are really working, and from what, Isine said something about, our sister. And that is that if you call her, she's the spokesperson, if you call her anytime, she reacts immediately. No matter how you push her, she's ready to react and she knows what she's talking about. I remember being in Enugu and Mujid had some issues and how they called her immediately, can you react to this and how she reacted? And that is, there is a power of the individual in the collective. It's patriotic Nigerians. Wherever you find yourself, have you done the bits that you need to do? Can you iron out? Can you be yourself? Myself, Jaye, I thought Jaye would have mentioned that we are members of the Labour Civil Society COVID-19, committee as well, with the Nigerian Labour Congress, president as a chair. So these are some of the issues. So we need to react to certain things. I want to also note that as journalists go on COVID-19, investigation, they need to be protected. They need to be given a PPE so that you can protect them. So let's take responsibility. I want to say something on the Kaduna, that's the homegrown school feeding program. In Kaduna State, for example, ActionAid was specially invited. Our staff went from here. We are working with MacArthur Foundation and working at that level, in Kaduna. They maintain a very open system. They have insisted that in their COVID-19 palliative response, that ActionAid should be involved. We are involved, we are on ground there and we are working. And they invite all stakeholders. It is wonderful when you want to achieve, when you have Nigerians who want to achieve results, what they do as well. We have helped to monitor the National Social Investment Program. And you can see, if you go to the website of government, in terms of looking at their performance, the social protection expenditure is 2.6%. And that's the spending, is the lowest spending, which is looking at where are the priorities, where are we willing to spend our money on. I just want to say that— The
webinar might shut us out now.
Yeah, yes, the webinar is going to shut us out. There's something that was mentioned. Citizens cannot maintain oversight of COVID-19 budget. We can participate, we can ask for accountability, but we as citizens do not have oversight. But I want to really thank you for your participation in this webinar, and I hope that when we invite you again, you'll be there with us. Let's continue. Take responsibility as an individual. Let's stay safe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone that participated. Next week, Thursday, we'll be on this platform again for another topical issue. I'm very sure we all will be invited again. Please just be rest assured.
And please thank you to DFID.
DFID. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Be rest assured that this conversation will continue until we get a headway out of the mess we find ourselves in Nigeria. Mr. Kodua, thank you very much for coming. Comrade Jaye Gaskia and Comrade Isine Iba, thank you very much for honoring our invitation. God bless you and try to stay safe. And all of you that participated. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
And thanks to all those who are the front line. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, my sister.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jaye. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Can we leave? Or shut it out?